Hey everyone, this is Jordan Last from Web Developer Training. Last time in the series, which we're doing right now, JavaScript from First Principles, we gave a high-level overview of objects, and we talked about how to create them with the object literal syntax. And I mentioned in that video, at least I think it did, that there are multiple ways to create objects. So in this video, or podcast, depending on how you listen to it, we're going to discuss other ways of creating objects. There are probably more ways than this, but these are going to be the main ways that you'll encounter. And by the way, I don't recommend using most of the ways that I'm going to show you, but it's important to show you anyway and let you decide for yourself. A little bit of a bias alert or disclaimer. I believe in functional programming more than object-oriented programming, so I try to approach things from a functional style. As much as I can. That doesn't mean I don't use object-oriented programming when I absolutely have to. I'll do something in an object-oriented way, but generally I try to avoid it as much as possible. So just so you know, I'm a functional programmer. I don't like object-oriented programming, and for reasons that we can discuss in other videos. So some of the ways I'm going to show you are more object-oriented. Probably the most functional way to create an object is the object literal syntax, which you already know from previous videos. But let's just dive in and see other ways. So we'll just go over real quick object literal again. So I make a variable using the const declarator, const object1, use the assignment operator equals, and I use opening and closing curlies, left and right curlies. This right here creates an empty object, and then inside of the curlies, I can create more properties. So if I want to make a property, I type the property name, in this case prop1, and then I separate the value with a colon. Prop1. Okay. If I want to add another property, I'll call it prop2, and its value is 2. And I can put a comma, and after the comma, I can put another property, prop3, 3. There you go. So we just created an object using the object literal syntax like we've already known how to do. Okay, so let's go on to the next way to create an object, which is using new object. So we're going to make an object called object2, const object2 equals. Instead of using opening and closing curlies, I'm going to say new. It's a new keyword, object. And now this object keyword, or you could say, is actually a function. So we need to call the function by using an opening and a closing parenthesis. So object2 is now an empty object. It has no properties. So this is just an alternative way that you could create an object if you really want to. I personally don't see a benefit to doing it this way. It's just more syntax for no obvious benefit. Let's see what the highlight says. Provides functionality common to all JavaScript objects. So I mean, it's just another way to create an object using the actual object or object function that is provided. And if you want to add properties when you're creating it, you can actually pass in an object literal and then put your properties in there. So again, I'll make a prop1 colon 1 comma prop2 colon 2 comma prop3 colon 3 comma. So that's a second way to create objects, new object. And new object without any parameters would give you an empty object. A new object passing in a object literal allows you to populate the object with some default properties, or not default, but initial properties. Okay, next is object.create. So we're going to create another object here called object3. Object3 equals object.create. And now let's look at what this what the create function, what parameters it has. So it says here, creates an object that has a specified prototype or that has null prototype. So what object.create does is it allows you to actually assign the prototype of the object that you're creating. Now, we haven't talked about prototypes yet. We'll probably make a whole video about prototypes. But essentially, prototypes are how JavaScript implements inheritance. So it's prototypical inheritance versus, I don't know, you might say classical inheritance, or however the other object-oriented languages implement their inheritance. But JavaScript does it in a slightly unique way to the other mainstream languages, and it uses prototypes. A prototype is essentially a property on an object that is an object in and of itself. And every object that's created does have a prototype. If you don't specify the prototype, it's going to give you a default prototype. So I guess I can show you that probably. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Probably shouldn't get too much into prototypes, but let's just do this. So this object here, notice it has an underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore, and this is its prototype, which is going to be the default prototype that all objects have if you don't assign them a prototype. I believe that's true. We will do a video, most likely, that goes way into prototypes. But for now, just know if you use object literal or new object, it's going to create the prototype for you. And if you ever want to set the prototype, you can use object.create. And so notice here, let's say I wanted object 2 to be the prototype for object 3. Then I would pass object 2 into here, like this. Perfect. Or if I wanted object 1, then I would pass object 1 in. And now object 1 is going to be the prototype for object 3. Again, I don't recommend using object.create. I don't recommend using prototypes. Generally, you want to favor composition over inheritance. And people use inheritance essentially to reuse code. And I just invite you to study up on composition versus inheritance and try to compose the functionality that you need without resorting to object-oriented inheritance, because it may lead you down a path of pain, misery, and destruction. So just a warning. Okay, next is a constructor function. So JavaScript has gone through a lot of changes in the last 10-ish years, especially the last 5 years. And it definitely is an object-oriented language, but it's also a functional language. It's multi-paradigm. And the way that object-oriented programming was implemented before was essentially classless object-oriented programming. There were not classes in JavaScript. There now are classes, which gives you a nice syntax to do the object-oriented things that you would want to do. But before classes, you had to essentially create objects with instance variables and with methods without classes, using functions. And so one way to do that would be, instead of creating a class, you'd create a function and you give it a name. Let's say it's a car. So I'd say function car. Okay. Now, if I wanted to create an object, so I'm going to say const car equals, I can actually use the new keyword, just like up here in new object. I could say new car. That will actually create an object that is a car. And I mean, right now it's just empty, but what you could do is you can pass in some instance variables here. So let's just be simple. Say prop 1, prop 2, and prop 3. These aren't instance variables necessarily, but these are going to become instance variables because we're going to initialize them like this. So you use this variable. This refers to the instance that is going to be created when the car function is called with the new keyword. So this is our object, and now we can say this dot prop1 equals prop1. So now we've actually assigned prop1. We've assigned the prop1 property of our car equal to the prop1 parameter that we pass in. And we can do the same thing with prop2. And we can do the same thing with prop3. So in this way, you can essentially create a class or it is a constructor function. It's going to create an object when you call it with the new keyword, and then you can assign these properties. And I mean, we can maybe get into object-oriented programming more later, the old way and the new way, but create using functions, using this, that allows you to create public properties or public instance members. And if you use just normal const, var, or let inside of your function, that allows you to create private properties or private instance members inside of your the object that you're creating. So that's how you can kind of emulate classes in JavaScript. But for now, just know this is another way. Oh, see, 1, 2, 3, and so now that we have added these parameters to the car function, we can go down here where we are actually calling new car, and we can pass in 3 parameters, 1, 2, and 3. And now when we create this car function, or create this car object, it's going to be an object with 3 properties already set, prop1, prop2, and prop3, and the values will be 1, 2, and 3. And the final way that we're going to discuss today is called classes. And like probably you might be familiar with, a class is generally the agreed upon way to do object-oriented programming, to create objects that have methods and that can change the local state that they have. And so very simple in JavaScript. Class, we'll use a car again. And bam, there you go. So this is a class, a car class. So let me change our previous variable to car1, because now car1 is going to be the object that we created using the constructor function. Car2 is going to be the object that we create with our class. And so now we can say car2 equals new car, and that's going to create an entirely empty function, or empty object. Sorry, I keep saying function because I like functions. There you go. Now, a car can also have a constructor, but you actually write the constructor keyword like this. So we can say this dot prop1 equals 1, this dot prop2 equals 2, this dot prop3 equals 3. Okay. Now when we create an instance of car, it's going to have those properties set. And remember, we might want to pass them in, correct? So we can go up here and we can say prop1, prop2, prop3. Sorry for people listening with audio. Sorry, I didn't explain the class syntax well enough to understand without seeing the video. But with creating a class, you essentially use the class keyword. So you type CLASS, all lowercase, and then you have a space, and then you put the name of your class. In this case, car, and we used a capital C. The convention with classes and with creating objects in an object-oriented fashion is generally to use a capital letter for the constructor function or the class. So car has capital C. And then we use opening and closing curlies. And if you don't put anything in between your opening and closing curlies with class syntax, it will just create an empty object. Then what I did after that is I created a constructor and used the constructor keyword, CONSTRUCTOR, constructor. And that is a method. So we don't need to use the function keyword on it. It doesn't have a function keyword, it's just a method. It implicitly knows that it's a function because it's within a class. And then we have an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses right after the constructor keyword. And then we have opening curlies, closing curlies, which creates the body of our constructor function or our constructor method. And then I put 3 parameters in our constructor, prop1, prop2, and prop3. And to create a parameter in a function, you type the name of your parameter, and then you separate it from other parameters with commas. So we have prop1, comma, prop2, comma, prop3. Okay, so now that I've passed these parameters in, I'll be able to replace the hard-coded values for our properties. Here we go. Now, when I'm calling new car, so we do new car, opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and I'll put some values in 1, 2, and 3. And so now this should create an object that has 3 properties set, prop1, prop2, and prop3, and its values will be 1. Their values will be 1, 2, and 3. So these are probably the main ways that you will see object literals, new object, object.create, using a constructor function, which is really an old way of doing it. Or if you want to be hip and object-oriented, which I don't think is hip, by the way, then you can use a class. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.